Hello friends, welcome back to my YouTube channel and welcome to another Tumbler tutorial. I am so excited about today's video. We are going to be doing a remixed, revamped, updated version of one of my most popular Tumbler tutorials. So back in 2021, I got this idea to make a 3D popcorn bucket tumbler because I am a self-diagnosed popcorn addict. So I put up that Tumbler tutorial and to this day, it's one of my most popular videos. So I decided to remake and update the design. In this video, I'm going to do two versions of the tumbler. So we're going to do a new technique for the glitter and epoxy cup. And then we're also going to do a rhinestone bling version. I had so much fun redoing these cup designs and I really hope that you guys like the updated tutorial. I'll have the original video down below in the description box if you want to go and watch that one after this one. I'll also have a full supply list for everything I'm using in this video down below in the description box. You know I'll have some discount codes down there for you too, and also links to both my Facebook group and my exclusive mentorship group, MBMM Elite. I'll also have links to all of my social media pages if you'd like to follow along with me anywhere else. This is a little bit of a longer video, just a warning, so get a drink, get a snack, get cozy, and I really hope you enjoy it. If you do, make sure you hit the thumbs up button down below and let me know what you think down below in the comments. Okay, I think that's it. Let's go! Starting with our rhinestone tumbler, we're actually going to start at the very bottom. We're going to do the glitter booty first. So these 24-ounce taper tumblers have a little bit of a ridge on the bottom, kind of like a mold almost. Like you can just fill in that little crevice and it'll give you a perfectly flat bottom. I'm going to do this with UV resin. You can use regular epoxy if you prefer, but UV resin obviously cures really quickly and is super easy to get this done fast. So I'm using Counterculture DIY UV resin and I mixed in a little bit of Sookie from Peachy Olive Glitters, which is a fine cut red glitter. Now I first did not mix enough, so you'll see I go in and add a little bit more. I would say you probably need about 10 milliliters of resin, maybe. That might be a little too much, but I think you'd rather have more than you need versus not enough. So I poured that into the ridge and here I am mixing more. And I'm using my heat gun to kind of move that resin around so that we get a really smooth, even coat that doesn't go over the edges. I really just want it to kind of fill in that little crevice there. So I'm also just moving my cup around, trying to get that resin to move, make sure we have that entire space filled. And I did add a logo tag to the bottom of this. I just plopped it right down into the middle of the resin before I cured it. For some reason, my phone stopped recording when I did that, but I'm just gonna put that right in the middle there. And then I'm gonna cure this with my UV lamp for 2 minutes. And if you wanted to, you could add another really thin coat of UV resin over the top of this to make this totally smooth. I'm actually going to keep this rhinestone tumbler, so I'm not going to do that. The bottom was perfectly flat, as you can see, and I didn't want to risk messing that up with adding another coat of UV resin. So once that's done, I'm going to go in and prep my tumbler. I'm going to sand it down really, really well, avoiding the bottom with a 120 grit sanding block, and then I'm going to just wipe down the surface of my cup with some rubbing alcohol on a towel, and then we'll tape off the bottom. Now for this rhinestone tumbler, we're going to leave the slightest little line of stainless steel at the very bottom. I don't want any of my stones to hang over that bottom edge and prevent the cup from standing flat and normal when you like put it on the table or something. So I'm going to tape this off with electrical tape, and then I'm going to take my cup edging tool and run it along the edge of the bottom of my tumbler, and I'm going to remove the top piece of the tape that was cut off, which is going to leave us with a really nice straight thin line of electrical tape to help us just keep everything straight and lined up right and give us that nice stainless steel finish at the bottom. Now moving into our glitter and epoxy tumbler, I'm using a 30-ounce Stubby from Craft Haven, and I made a quick little vertical stripe template specifically for this 30-ounce Stubby. I'll put this in my Facebook group, MBMM Makers Community, for free if you want to use it. So I just cut it out on regular red Orcal 651 vinyl, and this is just going to save us a whole bunch of time measuring, taping, base painting, and all of that. We're kind of just like cheat method base painting here. So I'm going to apply my transfer tape, and then we're going to trim off all of the edges of this wrap so that we can get it perfectly lined up and placed correctly on our tumbler. I did base paint my tumbler with matte white spray paint from Rust-Oleum, so we've got a good white coat on there, and now we're going to add the red stripes right on top of that. So I'm going to line up the top edge of my template with the top edge of my tumbler, and you can see there I've got a little strip of transfer tape exposed, and I'm going to use that to anchor down the template while I wrap it onto my cup. So I'm going to, once I've got it all lined up and perfect, I'm going to just smooth the vinyl on like I would any other vinyl wrap. I'm going to use my big squeege from the Bowen. This is the best thing ever. If you don't have one, I'll link it down below in the description box. It is super helpful for big vinyl wraps like this. I'm going to very carefully remove the transfer tape from my tumbler, and then I'm going to take my cup edging tool and run that along the bottom edge of my cup. I want to trim off any of that excess vinyl that's just hanging a little bit far on that bottom rim. We're going to paint the bottom red, so I just want everything to be smooth. I don't want any bubbles or wrinkles or anything in my vinyl before we go into base paint. We're going to start by glittering the red stripes first because those are the darker of the two stripes, obviously. So I'm going to just take some blue painter's tape and tape off all of the white stripes that we have on our cup. I'm trimming off the bottom, as you can see there, because like I said, we're going to do that in red glitter as well. So we just want really clean taped off lines so that everything is seamless down to the bottom of the tumbler. To base paint our red area, we're going to use red acrylic paint. This is Fire Red from the Delta Ceramcoat brand. So I'm going to paint the bottom, and then I used a little bit too much paint, so you'll see me bring it up onto those vinyl stripes that we have. You don't have to do that. I just had a little bit too much paint and wanted to spread it out and make sure everything was even. I'm going to let that totally dry. I think I let it sit for about 30 minutes, and then I'm going to go in with the epoxy method to apply my glitter. And I am going to be using the new Flynn Sisters Premium Epoxy. And I have exciting news. I will have a discount code for Flynn Sisters Supply Shop if you would like to go and try out this amazing epoxy, rhinestones, or anything else on the site. So you can use Mallory10 at checkout to save 10%. So we are going to put a very, very thin layer of this epoxy onto the red areas of our cup. And then I'm going to go in with my glitter. For the chunky glitter, I'm using Netflix and Chill from Peachy Olive Glitters. Now, when I made this cup before, the technique was a little bit different, and I used a fine cut red, and for this one I really wanted to use a chunky glitter because I feel like they just have a lot more sparkle. So I went in with the chunky, and then I'm going to go in on top of that to fill in any blank space we might have with Sookie, also from Peachy Olive Glitters, the same glitter that we used on the glitter booty for the rhinestone tumbler. I'm going to roll my cup up in some scrapbook paper to help that glitter lie flat. I always do this with my chunky glitters because if you don't get that glitter flat, it will be super rough to deal with when you go in and add your coats of epoxy. Once I've done that, I'm going to remove all of the painter's tape from the white stripes, and I'm going to let this sit and dry for a few hours. I think I let it sit for like maybe 3 to 4 hours. And then we'll be ready to go in and add the white glitters into those white stripes. Before I do that, I'm going to brush off any excess glitter that might be hanging out on top of those red stripes, just to make sure we don't have any cross contamination into that white glitter. For our white stripes, I'm going to mix together some white acrylic paint and some glitter glue from the Crystal Company. And we're going to use that as our adhesive for our white glitters. For the glitter, I'm going to do the same thing I did with the red stripes. We're going to use a chunky cut first and then go in and fill in any gaps with a fine cut. So I'm going to use Chunky Parabatai and Opal Majesty, both from Peachy Olive Glitters. While our glitter tumbler is drying, we're going to go back to our rhinestone tumbler and get that one all ready. So instead of using a template on this tumbler, I'm going to just kind of freehand my stripes. It was a lot easier that way. I did try to use a template at first and it just didn't look right to me. So I'm going to use some 1-inch painter's tape and I'm going to just hand place these stripes. So the first thing that's very important is to get your first stripe straight. So I tried a few different methods to get this straight. In the end, it was just easiest for me to eyeball it. Whatever looked straight to my eye was going to be fine with me. So once I've got my first stripe on, I'm going to take another little piece of tape and use that as a spacer. Now, because this is a tapered tumbler, we're not going to have perfectly sized stripes. So our red stripes are going to end up being just a little bit bigger than the white ones. The white stripes are obviously going to be about 1 inch wide, and then the red stripes will be just a little bit bigger. Now, if you want to do this a different way, obviously you are welcome to, but this is just the method that worked best and looked best to me. We're going to do the same thing that we did on our regular glitter and epoxy tumbler. We're going to base paint our stripes using that same red acrylic paint. And I'm really focusing here on getting the best coverage with the paint that I can, because we're going to go in and we're going to do a like cheat glitter. We are going to epoxy over this before we add our rhinestones. So I'm making sure that my coverage with my paint is as even and opaque as I can get it. Immediately after painting, I'm going to remove all of my painter's tape and I'm just going to set this aside and let it fully dry. I think I let it sit for about an hour. If you want to speed up the drying process, you can put your tumbler in front of a space heater or use your heat gun to speed it up a little bit. But once it's totally dry, we're going to go straight into adding our vinyl striping in between each of those red and white stripes. I'm going to use some light gold chrome vinyl. This is from Tech Wrap Craft. It really doesn't matter what kind of vinyl you use for this. All we really want is a nice kind of template for where to place our rhinestones. So as long as your stripe is the right size and the right color, the finish of the vinyl really doesn't matter because it's going to get covered anyway. Once we've got our stripes placed, we're going to add our coat of epoxy to our tumbler. I'm going to add in a little bit of glitter into my epoxy to give everything an overall sparkle and sheen. I also find that this really helps your rhinestones with coverage. Because it's sparkly underneath, it just kind of makes things look a little bit better in my opinion. I let my tape sit on the bottom of my tumbler for about 30 to 45 minutes after I added the epoxy, and then I removed the tape and let the cup finish spinning and curing without the tape on the bottom. So now we're going to go back to our glitter and epoxy tumbler. I added 2 coats of epoxy to my cup after I sealed my glitter. So I sealed it with the Crystal glitter glue and water. I do a 50-50 mix. Then I added my 2 coats of Flynn Sisters epoxy. Now I'm going to do some sanding, and then I actually had to go in and add another coat because it just wasn't smooth enough. So if your cup is not smooth enough and ready for decals, totally okay, do some sanding and add another coat of epoxy until your cup is smooth. So now that my cup is finally smooth enough for decals, I'm going to go in and add everything. So I cut out the popcorn outline for our middle circle here and our striping out of textured metallic champagne gold vinyl from Tech Wrap Craft. For our white circle, we're using Orcal 651 white vinyl. And then for this top red popcorn circle, we're using sparkle red holographic vinyl, also from Tech Wrap Craft. And I have this entire vinyl set available on my website, so if you want to use the exact decals I'm using, I've got the whole SVG pack available on my website, and it will be linked down below in the description box. So starting off here, we're going to layer the white bottom circle and the top red cutout popcorn circle. I'm going to layer those before I put them on the tumbler, and I typically don't do this because, as you'll see, it kind of has a tendency to cause some bubbling and lifting on those layers underneath. So when I pulled off my transfer tape, I had to go in with my craft knife and just cut a few little slits where those bubbles are to release the air and make sure everything is smooth. If you layer your decals on your tumbler, typically this doesn't happen. It's okay, it's fixable. If you do like to layer beforehand, just keep in mind that that's normal and you just have to go in and kind of cut these little holes in there. So once I'm done with that, I'm gonna go in with the gold popcorn outline. We're gonna layer this right on top of those red and white circles. We're gonna outline, obviously, the cutout and make it just look a little bit more dimensional. And now moving into our black lettering here, I'm using Onyx textured metallic vinyl. This is Cricut brand. And I'm using all of these textured pieces of vinyl because they don't really show the bumps underneath. So like for this word fresh, I'm gonna layer it on top of that circle just a little bit. And with textured vinyl, you can't really see those bumps underneath. It kind of camouflages everything. So it was really easy to just layer this right on top. I'm gonna do the same thing down at the bottom for the delicious and crisp. And now what I should have done, I just got a little bit too excited and did this first. I should have put down my gold striping before I did the black lettering because I had to go in and individually remove certain letters so that I could get these stripes to lay properly. Another option, if you wanted to, is put your gold stripes down, add a coat of epoxy, and then go in with all of your decals on top of that so that everything is smooth and doesn't look bumpy underneath. But you can see here, I'm just going to kind of cut around those circles, lift up these letters individually, lay the stripes down, and everything will be just fine. So if you forget like I did, it's okay. You can still make this work. You just have to figure out a little workaround. All is well. After all my vinyl has been laid down, I'm going to seal it really well with a coat of polyacrylic, and then I'll add another coat of epoxy on top of that. While that is curing, we're going to move back into our rhinestone tumbler. Our coat of epoxy is cured and ready to go, so I'm going to just really quickly sand down the top rim of our cup, and then we will be ready to add the decals on top of this so that we can have a template for our rhinestoning. So I'm going to speed through this kind of quickly. It's the exact same decal, SVG, pack, template, everything. The only difference is I cut everything out of like a flat vinyl. I didn't want to have any texture because obviously we're going to rhinestone over this. The texture doesn't really matter. Again, all we really want is a template and a color base to help us place our rhinestones. So I'm just going to layer all of these on, and then we will be ready to go in with our rhinestoning. All right, so a quick overview of the stones we're going to be using. We're using light Siam from Flynn Sisters Supply Shop. For the red stripes, I'm using sizes 5, 6, 8, 10, 16, and 20. So for my rhinestoning, I like to do the scatter method. The other method is the honeycomb method, and getting those perfect straight lines just stresses me out. So I like to stick with the scatter method. And for that, the more sizes you use, the better, I think. So I'm using a lot of different sizes and a lot of different colors for this tumbler. So for the gold, we're using Golden Shadow. And then for the middle red circle, we're going to use the glass jelly version of the light Siam. You can see it kind of has a different finish to it. We're also going to use some neon white, some transparent stones, and some black stones. As my adhesive, I'm using Liquid Fusion. You can use any type of adhesive that works best for you. There are tons of options out there, but I like Liquid Fusion the best. Now, when I was rhinestoning this tumbler, I was at the height of my tooth infection, so I was in a lot of pain. I wasn't really in the mood to be active and like doing a lot of stuff. So sitting on the couch and watching TV, rhinestoning this tumbler was the perfect activity for me. So I started with the black lettering. I'm using black rhinestones in the size SS10 to do that. And then I moved on to the gold striping. So I'm using SS12 golden shadow rhinestones for those. And now this is tedious. It is repetitive. It does take a really long time. But if you just sit on the couch like I did, watch your favorite TV show or your favorite YouTuber, you can just kind of get into a relaxation zone a little bit and just use this as a kind of zoning out activity. So after I was done with the gold part, I went in and filled in the lettering. I'm using neon white rhinestones for the popcorn white lettering, as you can see there. Now I really sped through a lot of this because it is, like I said, very repetitive and you just put these stones on one by one, but I just wanted to show you kind of from a different angle how I place the stones. Again, I'm using the scatter method, which is really just like a puzzle. You kind of just place the stones where they fit and make sure that everything is filled in the best you can. Now, my preference is to just take all of the same color stone, and you can see I just mix them together in my little tray here. If you wanted to keep your stone sizes separate, you can get a bunch of these little trays and separate your stones by size, but I just mix them all together. You guys know I love a good mix, so I'm just pulling them all from the same tray. Once I was done with the white lettering, I moved into my red stripes. So again, I'm using the light Siam rhinestones from Flynn Sisters Supply Shop, just placing those down. I'm going to do all of those, and then we will move into the white stripes. For the white stripes, I'm using transparent rhinestones. I thought about using the same neon white stones that I used for the popcorn lettering, but then I thought I wanted them to look a little bit different, so I decided to go with transparent. Now I like to work kind of section by section, so I'll put a big like square or area of glue down and just place my stones. If you want to, you can go line by line, you can do small sections, however you're most comfortable, but I was able to do relatively like medium to large sections. It really just depends on how quickly you're placing your stones. At this point in the tumbler, I was like in the groove, I was going, and I was just like in the zone. One thing to pay attention to is when you get around these little delicate letters, you want to be really careful, one, with your glue placement, and two, you want to use obviously the smallest stones you can to really fill in that space and make everything look well covered, full, and nice. So just keep that in mind, be careful, take your time, and it will look really beautiful in the end. The last step in our rhinestone tumbler is using the glass jelly light Siam stones for the middle red circle. So I added those in, and now our tumblers are done and it's time to move on to the toppers. So since we're doing 2 cups, I'm going to show you both a removable topper option and a permanent topper. For the removable topper, I'm going to use these 3D printed topper pieces. These are from Craft Crate. They're wonderful. They're sized for the brand of tumbler you're using, and the lid size, they're perfect. They've got magnets built in, so it makes these removable toppers really, really easy. For the 30-ounce stubby, we are using a large lid from Craft Haven, so I just grabbed that size and it fits perfectly in the lid. So I'm going to base paint this. Now when I was doing this, I was thinking, oh, I'm gonna base paint it so that it kind of has like a butter color almost. So I mixed a few pop of color paints together to get that butter color, but I almost wish that I would have just left it this white color because it really blends in well with the color of the popcorn pieces we're using. So totally up to you. These do not need to be base painted. You can just go right in with your topper, but I painted it to look like butter. I'm going to use hot glue to attach our popcorn pieces to our toppers. You can use any sort of adhesive that you like. I like hot glue because it dries really quickly and you can really build up these toppers fast. And I'm also pulling out all of the white popcorn pieces. This pack that I got on Amazon has like some caramel corn pieces in there too. I want this to just be plain old popcorn, but I am going to pull out a few of those caramel corn pieces to use in the middle of my toppers just to help me get a little bit of height. I'm going to kind of hide them in the middle and then build around them with those white popcorn pieces. So for the permanent topper on our rhinestone tumbler, I'm going to sand down the lid really well and then give it a good wash with dish soap and water. And then I'm going to go in with those little builder caramel corn popcorn pieces on the inside of that lid. So I'm going to put some hot glue down and then just place these down. As you can see, you can, if you want to, use all of the same color popcorn pieces. It's totally up to you. I just wanted to kind of hide these in the middle and avoid wasting those white popcorn pieces. I will have the popcorn linked in the description box down below, and I also have a few different options in my Amazon storefront as well if you want to check out a few different packages of them. So for this permanent topper, I really want a lot of width and height. So you'll see in the end when I have the removable topper on, the popcorn doesn't really like spill out or look full like it's actually in the carton. It kind of just looks like a little built up, like almost like hat. So I honestly prefer the permanent toppers because you have a lot more, I think, flexibility in placing your popcorn pieces. Like you can really bring them all the way out to the edge, and I think it just looks a little bit better once it's on the tumbler. One option that I used to do when I was selling cups and I sold these, I would make a permanent topper and then just send an extra plain lid so that people could use both and they could choose if they wanted to use the topper or not. And in my mind, that was a lot easier for me to just make a permanent topper, and extra lids are really inexpensive. So that was my solution for making these look as realistic as possible. So as you can see, I'm building up this popcorn topper, trying to make it look full and realistic, like there's a lot of popcorn in there. And I ended up putting the lid with a straw in it on another blank tumbler, just so I could make sure I didn't put any popcorn in an area where I couldn't like get a straw in and have it, you know, be functional, obviously. So I just went until I was happy with how it looked, and then I moved in to the removable topper. I'm going to do the same thing with those little caramel corn builder pieces in the middle, and then we'll build around those with our white popcorn pieces. Now, like I said, I think that the removable toppers look a little bit funny once they're on the cup. I might go back in actually and add a few more pieces to this to make it look as realistic as I can. I like the popcorn, like I said, to kind of spill over the edges of the lid just to make it look like an actual full bucket of popcorn and not like you just put a hat on your tumbler. I don't know. Hopefully that makes sense, but of course you have the freedom to do whatever you want, whatever you think looks good, go for it. This is art. You cannot do it wrong. I let these sit and really dry overnight, and now I'm going to seal them with some UV resin. I recommend sealing your toppers with either regular epoxy or UV resin. Just makes them last a little bit longer and gives them better longevity. It's really easy to keep them clean, and you don't have to worry about any of those pieces falling off. To adhere the magnets to the lid, I'm going to use some UV resin again. So I put some glue on the bottom of those magnets. I'm going to stick it down onto the lid, and then I'm going to kind of like flash cure this in my lamp. I let it sit for about 30 seconds just until it was dry enough for me to dislodge those magnets from each other. So I removed the removable topper, and then I cured those magnets onto the lid for another 2 minutes. So now we're going to go in and seal these with the UV resin. Now you can use a little silicone tool, you can use a brush, you can use a gloved hand. For me, it's easiest just to get in there with my finger and make sure that I've got the best coverage that I can get with my resin. Once I had the UV resin on both toppers, I did cure them at a bunch of different angles with my lamp. I ended up probably curing them in total for about 10 to maybe 15 minutes, but every 2 minutes I would turn them to a new angle to make sure that every nook, cranny, corner area of these toppers was totally cured. So once those are all done, we are going to pop them on our tumblers, and here are the final results. So here's the 2 finished tumblers. I am over the moon with how these turned out. I think they are a vast improvement from my first tutorial. And I really hope that you guys enjoyed this video. So here is the epoxy tumbler. You can see with the removable topper, kind of just is built up a little bit vertically. I would like the popcorn to spill out a little bit, but here's what it looks like without the topper. Still super duper cute without the topper. I think they're totally fine without them, and with, of course. And then here is the Rhinestone tumbler. Now I am going to keep this Rhinestone tumbler for myself. It was way too much work. I think nobody would pay what it's actually worth, in my opinion. So I'm going to keep this for myself. It is pretty heavy, so I think I will use it without the topper more often than with. But I'll show you here what it looks like without the topper in a minute. I think it's just as cute without, but either way, I really hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, make sure you hit the thumbs up button down below, subscribe to my channel if you're not already, and let me know what you think down below in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Okay, love you. Bye.